The midnight air has turned quite crisp since you were last up here. The storm clouds are hanging low over the valley, casting everything in this heavy, dark slate blue color, but the watchtower remains perfectly dry. I've been sitting here for an hour, just listening to the wind press against the thick stained glass. It has this low, rumbling frequency tonight, almost like a great engine purring beneath the earth, keeping us anchored while the rest of the world spins into tomorrow. The music floating through the corridors matches this heavy atmosphere so well. It has these long, suspended chords that don't seem to care about resolution, just drifting into the shadows of the rafters. I decided not to look through the main telescope lens tonight. Instead, my attention has been entirely captured by something sitting right here on the corner of the oak desk. An object I usually just use as a paperweight for the old celestial charts. It's a massive iron-rimmed hourglass. I don't even know who originally brought it up to the observatory. It isn't listed in any of the royal inventories, and the metalwork looks far too brutal and ancient to have been forged by our local blacksmiths. The pillars holding the glass bulbs together are carved with these tiny, interlocking spirals that look like coiled serpents biting their own tails. It's incredibly heavy, the kind of density that makes you feel like the object has its own personal gravity pulling at the dust motes of the air. But the most mesmerizing part isn't the frame, it's the sediment inside. It isn't ordinary playground sand or crushed river quartz. It's a fine, iridescent powder that glints with a soft, bioluminescent amber hue, exactly like the strange light we've been watching above the broken mountain peak. When the particles fall through the narrow glass neck, they don't plunge straight down in a heavy heap. They drift downward in these lazy, fluid spirals, looking less like falling dirt and more like a miniature galaxy swirling inside a transparent cage. If you stare at it long enough in the dim light, you completely lose your sense of scale. You forget you're looking at a desk ornament and start to feel like you're peering down into a massive cosmic whirlpool, watching the birth and death of stars happening in the palm of your hand. I've been thinking a lot tonight about the sheer arrogance of human calendars. We build these grand grandfather clocks with heavy brass pendulums. We draw up strict grids of months and years, and we convince ourselves that we have successfully partitioned the infinite. We treat time like a straight highway, a paved path with precise mileage markers, moving us from a fixed past into a predictable future. But up here, surrounded by the silence of the stars, that whole concept feels like a desperate coping mechanism. The old chronomancers, the ones who lived in the high cliffs before the first library was built, didn't view time as a line at all. They viewed it as a vast, shifting ocean. To them, the past hadn't vanished. It had simply drifted over the horizon, sitting in the deep water, just out of sight. And the future wasn't something waiting to happen. It was a current flowing towards us, carrying old wrecks and forgotten memories back to the shore. They believe that humanity's greatest illusion is our perception of the present moment, this tiny artificial dividing line we cling to because we are too fragile to handle the weight of everything happening all at once. Look closely at how the amber dust behaves when it reaches the bottom bulb of the glass. Instead of settling into a flat, dormant pile, The fallen grains keep moving. They tumble over one another in slow, perpetual waves, creating these shifting dunes of light that mimic the topography of the valleys below us. It's as if the hourglass doesn't actually measure the passage of minutes, but rather tracks the slow, rhythmic pulse of the planet's bedrock. I inverted the frame right as the chapel bells rang for midnight, and I've been watching the neck ever since. The rate of the fall is never consistent. Sometimes a massive cluster of grains will jam in the narrow opening, causing the flow to stop entirely for several seconds, as if the universe itself were holding its breath to let a specific thought settle. Then, without any physical intervention, it will suddenly loosen, cascading downward in a rapid, frantic torrent before returning into its lazy, cyclical drift. The rosemary oil in the lantern brackets has nearly burned through, leaving just a faint, smoky trace of herbal sweetness in the room. It mixes beautifully with the smell of the old linen pages open on my lap. My eyelids feel incredibly heavy right now, as if the amber dust from the glass is somehow escaping through the seams, settling over my brow like a soft, invisible blanket of sleep. It's a very comforting sort of exhaustion, the kind that doesn't demand answers, but simply invites you to lay down your internal coordinates. There's an old story about an emperor who tried to outlaw the use of hourglasses across the entire realm. He believed that if his citizens stopped visualizing the grain slipping away, they would forget about aging, forget about deadlines, and essentially become immortal through sheer ignorance of the count. He had all the glass smashers break every vial in the cities, replacing them with massive stone sundials that relied entirely on the shadow of the sun. But the plan backfired terribly. During the long winter months, when the gray storm clouds covered the sky for weeks at a time, the sundials became entirely useless. Without a shadow to tell them who they were or where they stood in the day, the people didn't become immortal. They simply became unstuck. They woke up whenever their bodies were tired. They ate when they were hungry, and they spent hours sitting by their hearths telling long, rambling stories that had no defined beginning or end. When the spring sun finally broke through the clouds and cast a sharp shadow back onto the stone dials, people looked at the numbers and realized they no longer recognized the language of the grid. They had tasted the freedom of the untracked dark, and they didn't want to go back into the cage of the hour. I think that's what we are doing up here tonight. We're letting the clouds cover the sundials. We're letting the music fill the gaps where the seconds used to live. You don't need to keep track of the days you've left behind, and you certainly don't need to engineer the days that are waiting over the horizon. Right now, the watchtower is quiet, the iron frame is steady, and the amber light is swirling in its own perfect, unhurried loop. Let the world below keep its clocks ticking. Let the politicians and the merchants hurry down the highway, chasing the illusion that they can outrun the setting sun. And we can just sit here in the dim light, watching the galaxy turn inside its glass walls, letting our thoughts slow down until they match the lazy, tumbling rhythm of the luminescent sand. There is no urgency in the dark. There's only the quiet, breathing space between the stars. Tell me, if time is truly an ocean instead of a highway, and every moment you've ever lived is still existing out there in the deep water, would you want to navigate your way back to a favorite memory, or would you let the current carry you into the completely uncharted depths of a dream? Till next time.